start off with an illustration that I'm not completely sure how I hope that it goes, whether I get raised hands or not. But I don't know if this has ever happened to you, and I'm not sure whether I should hope that you're going to raise your hand or not. But have you ever read the Bible and at some point or another, don't raise your hand now, that's too quick, because that's supposed to be a yes. But have you ever read the Bible and gotten to either a verse or a passage and you've gotten confused? Okay, so that sort of makes sense. But now I'm going to show my true human form, because sometimes you read that and at first glance you think, wow, that's pretty. And then you think to yourself what it actually means, and then you realize, now I'm a bit confused because I'm not completely sure what this means because it's confusing. But then because you're lazy and not wanting to understand this better, you immediately just in your head, well, Jesus said it and it must be something good, and you sort of give yourself this a scapegoat quick answer before you move on, because then you find peace, because you don't necessarily need to understand this, because I've got a passage to read. So if I skip this, it's fine, I'll understand the greater gist of things. And I'm getting a lot more smiles than I'm hoping for, not, because it means that you're just as lazy sometimes as me. And that's either a good thing or not. But in realizing this and how we sometimes struggle with texts, because sometimes I do feel, and I want to stress this, sometimes there's a time and a place where you can read something, be confused, and move on. That's good, because in the greater scheme of things, you will be able to understand things a bit better. There's a time and a place for that. But then other times, I'm reminded of how Sophia's family functions, and I feel that this is very often a good way to do things. Now, I very often reference her family, and I always do it in a smile and out of a loving heart. But for example, what we would do, speaking of family, here comes mine. Das is mama. And what happens when you visit their family, and for example, I'm just giving an illustration because this has happened countless times. We would be sitting, myself and Sophia, we would be in her parents' living room, let's say for example with her father, and we're chatting, just the three of us. It's a nice, intimate conversation where we're talking, and then right when you get to the punchline, you're sort of waiting for him to finish his story, her mother would walk in and say, "What now?" in that same tone of voice. And she would walk in, and then, because her family loves each other, he would start the story again. And that's fine, because it probably wasn't that long of a story, and you wait, and then the story goes again until roughly about that same punchline. And then one of her sisters would come in, and then say, "What now?" And then the story would start again, and then I would grin, "Oh, this is funny, cute." But then, at the same point in time, generally another family member walks in, saying, "But no," and then by this time, I just summarized the whole story. It's like, and I just want to find out, like, what happened. And this is something that happens because they're a big family and they don't mind sharing. But one thing that they do subliminally, got that word right, my Afrikaans is kicking in. So they do this without intention, they do this without purpose, because they know context gives everything. For them to fall in on the tail end of a conversation does not give them the true reality of the story. They don't necessarily do this intentionally, but they want to know the full story because they know that for them to understand the story, they need the whole story. And I think that very often we can have that, or we should have that same patience and love and compassion in having to share a story. Now, why do I mention all of this? Well, this week, I realized, okay, but listen, there's a short passage, it's going to be an easy text. I've read the sentence so many times, and then for the first moment, it dawned on me, I don't fully understand this, or I convinced myself that I had an idea what the story was about, and then I realized I'm going to have to stand at the front and explain it, and then you realize you don't. Because you think you do, and to a degree I was right, but it wasn't a fundamental truth in my life. And that's when I realized how I prepared this passage. Now that I've got you all hopefully on the edge of your seats, I'm going to start off with a recap, the what now part. What now? So, we're busy with the book of Luke. And what the story does, or how Luke tells his tale of Jesus and this culmination of the gospel is, he shows who Jesus is, and he shows the ultimate spiritual sidekick, John, because he sort of vouches for Jesus so that people will believe who Jesus is. And this is a wonderful way of all of this coming together. And once you sort of know that Jesus is important and John is important, and the two of them work together to a certain extent to glorify and to affirm who Jesus is, we start seeing Jesus do these miraculous things where he starts healing people, and he starts doing these controversial things of doing things on Sundays when you shouldn't, or on the Sabbath, when you shouldn't be doing it on the Sabbath. And he says controversial things that none of us really want to hear, like blessed are the poor, or pray for those who spitefully use you. Like, this is a way of ruffling or rustling some feathers and just making people feel uncomfortable. And this is what Jesus did. But yet, for some reason, people still follow him because they know that there's something more. And yet, they were confused. And I refer back to that message that we had where even John the Baptist, when he's in prison, right in God's will because he was standing for what was morally right in God's eyes, he was still sent to prison and life went completely astray. But in that moment, he had doubt. And I share this just like, for example, when I read scripture and sometimes I'm confused. It's okay for us to be confused, but what do we do with it? John sent his people around him, his family, his disciples, those that he loved. He sent them to Jesus to find out, listen, can you please just give me a confirmation? Please just double check. Send me your business card saying like Jesus Christ, like Messiah, just something. Just like confirm it as who he is. And then Jesus does what he does so well. He doesn't directly answer the question. He sort of says, well, tell John what you say. And what was happening at that stage is Jesus was healing and raising the dead and like doing all these wondrous things. So it's this amazing story of how all these things come together. Then he chooses his 12, and once he chooses his 12, these poor souls had no idea what was in store for them. But Jesus is teaching them, and yet they're still confused. And Jesus gives this parable of the sower that we discussed 2 weeks ago. This parable of explaining how people very often receive the gospel. Some people just ignore it flat. How the devil comes and he just takes it away and he stops them from fully hearing the gospel. Then secondly, you see people not really taking root. Like, yes, it's true, but I don't completely believe it. And then the third type of people is like, yo, that sounds amazing. And I want that. But then life starts getting difficult. And tribulation and that new car or that pretty lady or whatever it is that your distraction starts coming in, and then you start choosing those things ahead of your own salvation and ahead of Jesus. And then these people are pulled away by the cares of the world. But then the final group of people are those who cling on to the word. And we discussed this 2 weeks ago, and it was such a beautiful story. Well, I thought it was beautiful. But how it all came together of just this, choose life. But also understand that there are going to be those around you who are going to be thorns and thistles and pains in the necks around us. Very often, sometimes even in church, as Jesus made clear. Because these weeds are going to be among us. But that's how God allowed it. And I think very often this tests us to see whether we're truly rooted in Him or in the world. And that's sort of where we ended off last week. And I mentioned this is important for us to grasp because otherwise we won't understand this very short text that we're dealing with today. So the context is Jesus was just telling them about how we need to receive the gospel. And then carrying on with just one sentence or one verse. No one, when he lights a candle, covers it with a vessel or puts it under a bed, but sets it on a candlestick that those who enter might see the light. And all of you are thinking, Johan, that's such a simple text. That's not the one I was referring to. But all of us have this idea of what these texts might mean. And for us, I think very often we think about this because Jesus was essentially saying, like, listen, if you've accepted this gospel, you can't hide it. But very often we do. And then I can say something that sort of digs down to the heart of who we are. No one around us should ever be surprised when they hear that we're a Christian. They shouldn't, ever. That is the biggest insult a Christian can ever have. Because it should be part of who we are. Not because we're Bible beating, not because we're forcing people, but think about those around you. Whether they love rugby or fishing or cartoons or PlayStation or whatever it is that they like. Somehow they have a way of working it into a conversation. Someone be like, yes, I got a flat tire. Yes, I remember that time I was watching the rugby. It's like that's what people do, and it's not in a forceful way. It's not in a, I'm trying to convert you. It's like I'm sharing something I'm passionate about. That's what people do when they're passionate about something. I remind you again about how I've spoken to my Chinese students, for example, and how they speak about playing hide and seek. And for some reason, that just dawned on me, like, how on earth did the game hide and seek traverse every border, every culture, everything. No matter where you go, everyone knows how to play hide and seek, regardless of anything. And there was no convention of church leaders or game leaders getting together. How can we share the story of hide and seek? Okay, first we're going to tell them how to hide, and then we're going to tell them how to seek. No, that just didn't happen. People shared it because it was fun. They shared it because it was passionate. And this is what Jesus is referring to. When he speaks about us having the light, it means our salvation, that light being our salvation. And the fact that we have hope in God, even though life sucks. Like John the Baptist being in prison, like his life wasn't easy. His disciples, people sort of hated them and chased them away. If you read the book of Acts, you'll realize that the prosperity gospel has no place, because they were chased away and hunted down. And because of that, the gospel spread, because they got too comfortable in their faith. Like God was like, okay, but listen, you don't want to go out and spread the story. I'll force you to go. And it's not like he did it intentionally or out of malice. He just works all things together for good. But now some people get to this point and it's like, yes, I'm going to shine Jesus' light like a spotlight. No. It's not an interrogation light. It's so that when people are in your vicinity, they can see what is already around them. The thing about light is it never creates something new. It just illuminates what is already there. Like if you're in a dark room in a new place, when you switch on that light, you can see clearly. What the true gospel is, the true story of Jesus, and what we truly believe is when we switch on that light, and when we live our life, people will start making sense, and they will start understanding what is happening around them. They will see the world is literally going to hell, and things are going just more difficult, and it's not going to get better till Jesus restores everything for the better. Like this is what Jesus was talking about. Like, listen, if you're truly a disciple, people need to know it. Because otherwise, you're hiding under a bed. And this is just not how it's supposed to be. But then he carries on to the next verse, which is also not the verse that confused me. For nothing is secret that will not be revealed, nor anything hidden that will not be known and revealed. And at first glance, you're sort of like, where does this verse come in? And I think the reason for it is because very often we have these type of Christians that want to be Christians, but no one should know. Because if they know, then they'll judge me. Or if they know that I'm a Christian, they'll have different standards of with which I should live. Or maybe I don't want them to know that I'm a Christian because that will cause other things to happen. Or what about that thing that I did in my past? And Jesus just sort of removes all of that, and he reminds us that I don't care what your reason is. If you firmly believe this, anything that you've done, anything that you believe, all of this will be revealed. It's such a beautiful thing where it just sort of disarms all of our thinking in such a beautiful way, actually. And it's so daunting at the same time when you start to think about it. There's a time when everyone's going to be knowing everything about everyone. Now, to what extent that's completely theologically true, I'm not completely sure. All I know is that we should stop hiding anything, because there's a point in time where we should just be true to ourselves. And then here's this verse that you've been waiting for. That confuses me if you really think about it. At first glance, it sounds beautiful. It sounds very Christian-like. It sounds like something that Jesus would say, because he did. Take heed, therefore. It means be careful or pay attention to how you hear. Even he says, like, listen closely. For whoever has, to him will be given, and whoever has not, from him will be taken away, even what he thinks he has. At first glance, I don't know, maybe I was just slow. To him that has will be given more, and him that does not have will be taken away, even if he thinks he had. Now, immediately I sort of think about, our gifts and our talents. Those, like, there's this other parable where Jesus starts speaking about our gifts, where, the people who had money, the one person invested, the other one worked it, and the other one just saved it and put it under the ground. And there's this principle of, if you use your gifts, then I'll give you more. And if you don't use your gifts, then I'll take that away. Now, that sort of makes sense, but he's not speaking about gifts. He's speaking about salvation, the context, the what no part of this whole message. What are we speaking about? We're speaking about the light. So Jesus is essentially telling them, if you shine your light, if you live your Christian life, if you seek me, I will give you more. But now suddenly I also start realizing those people very often who struggle in life and who struggle to see Jesus the most are those who will hold their Christian faith here in the back pocket when no one's allowed to see it. And then they wonder why they can't hear Jesus, or why they wonder why life is so difficult. Because Jesus is a part of your life, He's not your life. And I'm speaking to myself more than I'm speaking to any of you, because very often, yes, on Sundays we gather here and I have the opportunity and the responsibility to share a message, and it's something that I love and it's something that I'm thankful for. But at the same time I also realize that when we go out in life and people don't know us, it's sometimes just nice to be Johan. It's nice because people don't necessarily come to you with those questions that I love talking about, but every now and again I just want to sit. But I imagine Jesus also wanted to sit. But then people came to Him and they asked for healing. And they asked Him stupid questions in the sense of wanting to make Him trip over His own words and things like that. And it's not because I've got this position, but each and every one of us has this responsibility to be the light. And guess what? To be the light, to shine the light. You never shine the light when it's daylight. We shine the light in the dark, which means it's uncomfortable. It's like that early morning on a winter morning when you wake up and it's cold and it's dark and you don't want to be there. That's very often what your life will be like. And I'm not saying that's how it should be, but that's when light shines best. We have this responsibility of understanding that when we have light, when we seek more of Jesus, God will give us more. When we earnestly want to be His people, He will give us more of Him. When we hide Him and when we shy away from our responsibility as Christians and continuously put the load on, yes, but He's the pastor, so He should know. That's above my head, or this is above me. No. He called all of us to be disciples. Jesus didn't say, go out into all the world and make them gather together on a Sunday. He said, make disciples. Make people who follow me, and then you lead them and they lead others. That's the whole point of us gathering together. That's the whole point of us believing. But then that sounds also very legalistic to me. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm oversharing a bit too personally here. But now it sort of feels like this, if you do this, then this. Is it really? If all of you hear about how I don't feed Sophia, or how I use and abuse her, or how I speak badly of her, does that really show my love? Someone who has a passion for sport or a passion for fishing, for example, you don't need to ask them to do something, it's just part of who they are. I have many students in Europe who very often like to use the following term: I'm Catholic, but I don't practice. And I keep on thinking, well, then you're not Catholic. And I've questioned quite a few of them on that note. Probably putting my job on the line, but that's fine. Because if you're not practicing, then you're not a Catholic. It's like me saying, I scuba dive, but I don't scuba dive. I don't have the certification, I've never been underwater for that long, and I don't have the equipment, and I've never done the course, and I've never gone out on a boat, but I scuba dive. For some reason I want to say Scuba Steve, like that Who's the Big Daddy movie or something. Is that really the type of Christianity that we're living? I'm a Christian, but I don't read my Bible, only that short verse on a Sunday that Johan reads for us on the screen. I don't read it during the week. And it's not about works, but is that really where our light shines? Is it really what's part of who we are, or is it something that we like to attach ourselves to? And then what happens, how Jesus uses this next interruption, because He's busy teaching this. And then the next moment, there's this interruption of His family. I don't know if any of you know anything about interruptions. Any of you have children? No. You'd be busy, and this would be like this beautiful teaching moment. Everything's going good, and then suddenly, family happens. Then His mother and His brothers came to Him, but could not reach Him because of the crowd. Someone told Him, your mother and the others are standing outside desiring to see you. Beautiful moment. But then Jesus answers, my mother and my brothers are those who hear the word of God and do it. Jesus is telling us He's not denying his brother or his mother, but he's telling us this is not a legalistic requirement. When you shine your light, I'm inviting you in to be part of my family. Families stand together through thick and thin, through difficulties and ease. This is the legalistic requirement. All he's saying is when you believe, really commit. If you're going to say like, listen, this is what I'm going to do, like put all your cards on the table. Shine your light. Be that person. It doesn't mean that you should have all the answers, because this is the sort of thing that I want to, it's one thing for me to end the service and say, listen, life is wonderful. We need to shine our lights. I quickly want to throw myself under the bus here, either make myself look good or bad. But I remember we were in youth once, when I just became a Christian. I was about a Christian for about a year. And we went to youth, and it was wonderful. And at one song, we sort of made a joke of it, but then it became fun of, there was a song, Ons sal sy lig laat skyn, and we created our own sort of things for it. Now, I realized how geeky I was. I was about 16 at the time, so this is not a time when you do this type of stuff, but the whole group of us really passionate about God. Ons sal sy lig laat skyn, and I can't remember the rest of the words, but it was something, it looked horrible. But it was fun, and we did it out of a true passion for Jesus. But this is what we did at youth. But then that same dominee and band would come on a Monday morning or on a Wednesday morning to our school and then also sing some of the songs as you do before school. But then I realized very quickly, when we sang the songs then, all of us were like this. Like there's no passion, there's no nothing. And we discussed this, I think, 1 or 2 weeks afterward, and I can't remember who said it. I want to take credit for it, but I don't think that it was completely me. In fact, I think it was someone else. And I was very unhappy that he mentioned that point, because now I felt convicted about how he mentioned how we had passion for Jesus there, but not in front of people. So when we were in our secluded little group, then we had passion, but not in school. So that sort of forced us into this guilt at school. So now I've got 1,400 kids. We're already not the cool kids. And now there's 5 of us doing these songs with these words. It looked horrible. But no one ever said anything to us about that, because all of them also felt convicted about the fact that we had passion. And for the rest of that year, every time that song played, we did the moves. As horrible as it looked. And after about a 3rd or 4th time, it was just like, okay, this is what we do. We can't go further down on the social scale. Like there's stones, there's whale moss or something, and then it's us. But that's where we were. So there's no going down. But I firmly feel that because we had that passion, God blessed us. And He respected. And somehow I think He responds. But it doesn't mean that we should have all the answers. Because very often we have this idea of, because I'm a Christian, my life should always be easy. I should always have the answers. And always this. And I really think that that shouldn't be the case. Just this week, I learned or understood for the first time what the word Israel means, and I sort of want to use this as a way of closing, as I'm trying to say, like, listen, let's shine His light. And I can leave it there, and you can all say, yo, that was nice, but it doesn't mean anything. The word Israel means, now for those of you who don't know Jacob, you have Abraham, and then Isaac, and then Jacob. So till then, they were the nation of Abraham. Okay, so his descendants, the chosen nation through whom the whole world will be saved. Let's not go too in deep or in too much depth. But then you have Abraham and then Isaac and then Jacob. Now Jacob was the youngest son. He wasn't supposed to be there in the first place. He wasn't supposed to have authority or anything, because he took it from his brother, who just couldn't care less about what he had. Like, he had the firstborn rights and then he didn't take it. He didn't realize the responsibility in it. But then what he did, after he bought it with basically a potjie, a venison potjie stew thing, he got this authority, but then his whole life, he ran away from every type of conflict. If you read the story of Jacob, he ran away from everything. He ran away from his house after he rightfully got the firstborn rights. He ran away from everything. He let people walk all over him. And then eventually he's like, okay, listen, I'm going to go back to my brother and he's going to kill me and that's fine. And on his way back, there's this narrative that doesn't always make sense, where he's in a cave And he wrestles this person who he understands throughout the night is God. And it's confusing because he wrestles with God. And then Jesus changes, well, I believe it was Jesus. It's a Christophany where it's this person and he's like, I need you to bless me. I need you to be part of me because I can't do life without you. I can't face my brother until you bless me. I can't face this uncertainty before you connect with me in that way. And that's when he continues to wrestle and God dislocates his hip bone and sort of just as a sign or something to lead him in the long term. But long story short, that's when his name is changed from Jacob to Israel. Israel means to wrestle with God. The reality of God's chosen people or those who wrestle with God is a message that is so beautiful. Because what God wants from his people are those who wrestle with him. Not fight him, but who earnestly seek him. They don't just take everything for granted. They don't sell their firstborn rights. They don't just say, okay, yes, this is it, or be ignorant of life. Those who wrestle with God, being us, his new Israel, those who cling on to Jesus and who want to shine his light, are those who stand firm in their faith, regardless of the pressures of the world, because God, I want to understand this. I want more of you. That's what it truly means to shine his light. Because we have this understanding that God, I don't understand this text, help me understand it. That's what his disciples did. Remember with the previous passage, they went to Jesus and they were like, okay, Jesus, this is wonderful, but why do you always speak in these confusing stories? And he told them, because for some people, they just don't want to hear, so I'm not even going to make it easy for them. But for you who really want to know, you're going to have to ask me. You're going to have to get that interpretation. And those who it is intended for will understand. And that comes back to us being those who wrestle with God. Because sometimes our faith is not going to be easy. Sometimes life is not going to be easy. And it's through that we need to shine our light. Because very often it's through friction that light shines best. And that's just really something that I just feel that we need to go throughout in this week. When we shine our light, never ever should we pretend to be perfect. Never ever should we pretend to have all the answers. If you don't, be honest and humble and say, listen, I don't know, I'll get back to you. Like really, that's the type of faith that I believe God wants from us. Because through that, we can become part of his family. Because we're starting to do our life according to his will and not our own. Let's close our eyes and pray. God, I want to say thank you so much for this morning. Thank you for this cool weather where we're reminded about the embrace and comfort of home and family, Lord. I ask that you please open up our hearts, our minds, and our eyes and our ears to the message that you have for us, Lord. Allow us to shine your light, Lord. Don't take it away from us, Lord. Help us to grow in our understanding so that we can shine a brighter light, Lord, so that people can see you all the more clearly, Lord. Help us be your people. Help us wrestle with you in a way of wanting more of you, realizing that we can't face the world without you, Lord. I thank you for your love, Lord. I thank you for your passion. Amen.